The forest was silent, but the silence did not feel safe. It felt heavy, like the whole planet was watching, waiting somewhere between the trees and the fog. A broken starship lay on the ground, its metal skin torn apart, smoke rising from the wreck like dark fingers reaching for the sky. The crash had been loud, like thunder splitting the world, but now only the sound of fire and broken wires remained. Inside the wreck, a man slowly opened his eyes. His name was Daniel, a human engineer. His head hurt. Blood touched his face, and his ears were still ringing from the impact. For a moment, he did not know where he was. He saw flashing sparks, the smell of burned circuits, and the crushed seats of the cockpit. His hands trembled as he tried to move. The ship was destroyed. He knew it at once. The engines were gone, the wings broken, the communication system dead. No help was coming. No rescue ship would find him here. Daniel pushed himself up, his body weak, but alive. He reached for his tool belt. But most of his gear was lost in the crash. He stepped outside, his boots sinking into the soft moss of the alien ground. The air was strange cold but rich. The sky above was filled with two suns, their light fighting through the tall trees. He tried his radio, but only static answered. He was alone, or so he thought. The forest stretched for miles. Tall green giants rising into the mist. The ground was covered in ferns that glowed faintly in the shadows. Strange birds with crystal wings flew overhead, crying with voices that sounded almost human. Every step Daniel took made the silence heavier. Then he felt it. He was being watched. Daniel stopped. His heart began to beat faster. He looked around, eyes scanning the forest. He saw movement shadows shifting between the trees. A figure was there, standing just beyond the smoke of the wreck. The figure did not run. It stood tall, almost calm. The light from the suns touched it, and Daniel saw her more clearly. It was a woman, but not human. Her skin was green, glowing. Softly, like the leaves around her, her hair was silver, flowing like water. Her eyes shone like twin stars, watching him without fear. She wore something that looked like a suit, but it was not human design, sleek, smooth, and made for another world. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his throat. His mind raced. Was this planet already home to an intelligent species? Was she dangerous, a hunter, or another survivor like him? The woman stepped closer. Her movements were slow, careful. Like she did not want to frighten him, she tilted her head, studying him as if he was the strange one. Daniel raised his hand slowly, showing he had no weapon. His voice shook as he spoke, though he knew she would not understand. I don't want trouble. I just crashed. The alien woman said nothing, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She seemed to understand his fear. Her lips moved, speaking words in a soft, musical voice, a language Daniel had never heard before. The sound was beautiful, but it made no sense to him. They stood like that for long moments, man and alien. Strangers surrounded by broken metal and deep forest. Then Daniel's knees weakened. He almost fell. His wounds from the crash were catching up to him. The alien woman stepped forward quickly. Surprising him, she caught his arm before he hit the ground. Her touch was strong but gentle. Her glowing eyes studied his injuries. Daniel was too weak to resist. His heart raced. Not from fear this time, but from something else, he realized. She was helping him for the first time since the crash. Daniel felt a spark of hope. Maybe he was not alone after all. But the forest around them whispered differently. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, deep growls from creatures hidden in the mist. The woman looked toward the trees, her expression sharp, as if she knew danger was close. She pulled Daniel's arm over her shoulder and helped him stand. Together, they moved away from the wreckage into the green shadows of the alien forest. The broken ship smoked behind them, a grave of steel and fire. The forest swallowed their figures, one human and one alien, walking into the unknown. Daniel's mind swirled with questions. Who was she? Why was she here? Was she the reason his ship had fallen from the sky? Or was she, like him, a prisoner of this wild planet? He did not know, but one truth became clear as they disappeared into the mist. His story of survival was no longer his alone. The forest air was cold and heavy. Every breath Daniel took felt strange, almost too sharp. The green-skinned woman moved slowly, her silver hair glowing under the twin suns. She carried most of his weight on her shoulder as they walked. Daniel tried to speak, but his words broke into coughs. His body ached with every step. He looked at her face, calm, unreadable. Her glowing eyes never left the path ahead. She moved like someone who belonged here, someone who knew the dangers hiding in the shadows. After some time, she led him to a small clearing. The ground was soft with glowing moss, and tall stones stood around it like silent guardians. She lowered him gently onto the moss. He groaned, but felt a little relief as the cool surface touched his skin. The alien woman knelt beside him. She reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a small container made of silver metal. From it, she poured a thick blue liquid onto a strip of fabric and pressed it to his wounds. Daniel gasped. The liquid burned at first, then slowly cooled. Numbing the pain, she spoke again, her voice soft and musical. The words were still strange, but her tone was not. It carried calmness, care, and something Daniel had almost forgotten since the crash kindness. Daniel stared at her hands as she worked. They were steady, skilled. She had done this before. She was not just a stranger, she was a survivor too. When she finished, she sat back, watching him. Her glowing eyes searched his face. Daniel forced himself to sit up a little. His voice was weak but steady. "Thank you," he whispered. Pointing at the bandage, he tapped his chest. "Daniel." The alien woman tilted her head, then pointed at herself. Her lips moved. "Leora," she said. Daniel repeated the words softly. "Leora," for the first time. She smiled. It was small, cautious, but real. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the distant sounds of the forest, strange calls of unseen creatures and the rustle of leaves. Daniel's mind raced. Why was she here? How had she survived? Was she stranded like him? As if reading his thoughts, Leora pointed at the sky, then made a crashing motion with her hand. She mimed fire and falling. Then she placed her palm flat against the ground. Her silver hair fell across her face, and her expression turned heavy with memory. Daniel understood. Her ship had crashed too. She was also trapped here. He looked back through the trees, where smoke from his own ship still rose into the air. Two broken travelers from different worlds, stranded on the same cruel planet. Suddenly, a sound cut through the forest, a deep, guttural growl. Both Daniel and Leora froze. The sound was close, too close. Leora's glowing eyes narrowed. She stood quickly, pulling a small blade from her hip. The blade shimmered with strange light. Daniel tried to rise, but his body betrayed him. His wounds made him stumble. Leora placed a hand on his shoulder. Gently pushing him back down, she shook her head firmly, her eyes telling him to stay quiet. The growl grew louder, followed by heavy steps crunching against the moss. From the trees, a beast appeared. Its body was massive, covered in black scales that reflected the twin suns. Its eyes burned like fire, and its long jaws dripped with thick saliva. Daniel's heart pounded. He had never seen anything like it. The creature moved low, circling the clearing. Its growls shook the ground. Leora stepped forward, fearless. Her glowing blade hummed as she raised it. The beast roared, lunging at She leaped aside with impossible speed, striking at its side. Sparks flew where the blade cut into its scales. The beast screamed, swinging its tail like a whip. Daniel watched helplessly as the fight unfolded. Leora was fast, but the beast was strong. Each strike of her blade lit the clearing with flashes of light. The air shook with roars and crashes. At last, the beast lunged again, its jaws snapping toward her. Leora rolled under it and drove her blade deep into its chest. The creature roared one last time before collapsing onto the moss. The ground shook as its body hit the earth. Silence returned, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. Leora stood over the beast, her chest rising and falling. Her silver hair clung to her face. Her glowing skin shimmered in the fading light. She looked powerful, untouchable. Then she turned back to Daniel, and in her glowing eyes he saw something unexpected. Not pride, not victory, but worry. She rushed to him. Kneeling by his side again, her hand touched his shoulder gently. She spoke quickly in her strange tongue, her voice urgent. Daniel did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. She was telling him he was not safe here, that the forest was full of dangers worse than this beast, that survival would not be easy. Daniel's lips trembled. He whispered again, "Thank you." Leora, her glowing eyes softened. For a brief moment, the fear faded to strangers. Two survivors, bound by danger and need. The forest around them was no longer silent. The growls of other creatures echoed in the distance. The night was coming, and with it, new dangers. Daniel realized the truth. He was no longer just stranded on an alien planet. He was trapped in a world where only trust, courage, and this strange alien woman could keep him alive. And somewhere deep inside, a new thought began to rise. Maybe he was not the only one who needed saving. The night fell quickly on the alien forest. The twin suns slipped below the tall trees, and a deep blue darkness spread like a wave. Strange glowing plants lit the ground, their soft light painting everything in ghostly colors. Daniel sat against one of the tall stones in the clearing, his body weak, his wounds still burning. Beside him, Leora moved quietly, gathering branches. She built a small fire that flickered with green flames. Fed by strange moss she carried in her pouch. The forest was alive with sound streaks, distant growls, and whispers of creatures unseen. Daniel kept looking into the shadows, every noise making his heart beat faster. Leora, however, was calm. She seemed to know which sounds meant danger and which were only the voice of the forest. When the fire grew steady, she turned to him. Her glowing eyes reflected the flames. For a moment, Daniel thought she looked less like a stranger and more like a guardian, but silence sat heavy between them. Two people, two worlds, no shared words. Daniel pointed to himself. Daniel, he said again, slowly, firmly. Leora tilted her head. She touched her chest. Leora, she answered, her voice soft but clear. Daniel tried again. Pointing at the fire, he gestured with his hand. Shaping the flames, Leora repeated, "Fi." Her accent wrapped the words strangely, but it was enough. Her glowing lips curved in the faintest smile. Then she touched the fire, speaking her own word. Musical and flowing, Daniel repeated it clumsily, and she laughed. It was the first time he heard her laugh, soft like wind through leaves. That moment was small, but it broke the wall of silence. For the next hours, they traded words, pointing at things, the moss, the trees, the stars, and giving them names. Daniel's words in English, Leora's in her alien tongue. They stumbled, they laughed, they failed and tried again. A language of survival slowly began to grow between them. But not everything was laughter. The forest reminded them of danger. Strange eyes glowed in the distance, watching from the dark. The air carried low growls that grew closer, then vanished, every so often. Leora's hand went to her glowing blade, her posture tight, ready. Daniel saw it too. He whispered, "We are not safe here." Leora did not understand the words, but she understood his fear. She nodded once, firm and serious. When the fire burned low, Leora rose. She motioned with her hand, pointing to the forest. Then to him, then mimed walking. Daniel frowned. "You want to move? Now?" She repeated the motion, more urgent this time. Her eyes flicked toward the dark shapes between the trees. Daniel followed her gaze and shivered. The forest was not just dangerous, it was hunting them. With effort, Daniel stood, his legs trembled, but he would not be a burden. Leora moved beside him, steadying his steps together. They left the clearing, the fire dying behind them. They walked through the night. The ground glowing under their feet, the trees rose like towers, their branches stretching into endless shadows. Daniel tried to stay quiet, but questions filled his mind. Who was Leora, really? Was she just another lost traveler, or something more? He looked at her, her glowing skin shimmering against the darkness. Her eyes sharp, her movements graceful. She looked like a warrior, but her touch, when it steadied him, was gentle, almost kind. Hours passed until they reached another clearing. This one was smaller, guarded by fallen stones and thick ferns. Leora stopped, scanning the area. Finally, she nodded and guided Daniel to sit. She set her blade down and began arranging stones into a circle. Preparing another fire, Daniel watched her hands move quickly, efficiently. He realized she had done this many times before. When the fire lit again, Daniel leaned forward. "You?" "Stranded," he said, pointing at the sky and miming a crash. Leora's face darkened. Her glowing eyes lowered. She touched her chest and nodded slowly. Then she pointed to the stars and spoke a string of words Daniel did not know. Her voice carried sadness. He understood without translation. She too had lost her people. Silence stretched, heavy with unspoken pain. Daniel whispered, "I'm sorry," though he knew she could not understand. But when he said it, her eyes lifted, and for a moment they shared the same grief. Suddenly, a sharp howl tore through the night. Both of them froze. The sound was close. Too close. Leora grabbed her blade and moved to the edge of the clearing. Daniel's heart raced. He reached for a piece of metal from his ruined tool belt, hardly a weapon. But it was all he had. From the shadows, glowing shapes appeared, three smaller beasts, their eyes burning like fire. Their bodies moved low. Circling the clearing, Leora raised her blade, but this time Daniel stood beside her, his grip tight on the metal pipe, his voice low. "We fight together." Leora looked at him, surprised. Then slowly, she nodded. The beasts lunged. The forest filled with roars and sparks. Daniel swung clumsily, but with desperate strength. Leora moved like lightning, her blade cutting through scales and shadows. The battle was chaos, but together they held the line. Every strike, every step, was not just survival, it was trust being built. Brick by brick, in the fire of danger. When the last beast fell, silence returned once more. Daniel stood, shaking, his chest heaving. Leora lowered her blade. Her glowing eyes locked on him, and for the first time she did not see weakness. She saw a partner. An uneasy alliance had begun. The forest woke with the first light of the twin suns. A pale golden glow touched the tall trees, and the mist lifted slowly from the ground. Daniel sat near the small fire, his body aching but alive. His hands still shook from the battle during the night. Leora was already awake. Her glowing eyes scanned the trees, her blade resting across her knees. She did not sleep much. Daniel realized she watched the forest as if it was her enemy. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes. He whispered, "This place, it's alive." His words were soft, but the forest answered with strange calls. Bird-like shapes flew above them, their wings clear as crystal. Small glowing insects floated in the air. Buzzing like tiny stars, Leora stood and motioned for him. To follow, she pointed to the sun, then to the forest path. She wanted to move. Daniel nodded. Even though every muscle in his body protested, they walked for hours through the strange wilderness. The ground shifted under their feet, sometimes soft with glowing moss, sometimes hard with black stone. The trees twisted into strange shapes, their roots as thick as walls. Daniel felt as if the forest itself was watching. Leora moved with confidence, her steps careful but steady. She touched plants as they passed, studying them. Some she avoided, pulling Daniel away before he could touch. Others she collected, placing their leaves into her pouch. Daniel realized she knew which plants were safe and which were deadly. The silence between them was broken only by simple words. "Water," Daniel said when he grew thirsty. Pointing at his mouth, Leora nodded, leading him toward a sound-running water. They reached a stream, clear and bright. Glowing faintly as it cut through the rocks, Daniel knelt and drank deeply. The taste was cold, almost metallic, but it refreshed him. Leora filled a container and drank as well. Her silver hair caught the light. Her glowing skin reflected the water. For a brief moment, Daniel forgot the danger and simply stared at her. She looked unreal, like a living star. But the peace ended quickly. A ripple passed through the water. Daniel frowned. What was that? Before Leora could answer, the stream shifted violently. A long shadow moved under the surface. The water exploded upward as a massive creature surged out. Its body was snake-like. Covered in wet scales, its head wide, with rows of sharp teeth. Glistening in the light, Daniel stumbled back, but Leora was faster. She shouted in her own tongue, pushing him away from the edge. The creature struck, its jaws snapping shut where Daniel had just been. Leora leaped aside, her glowing blade flashing. She struck the creature's head, sparks flying. The beast hissed. Retreating into the water only to lunge again, Daniel grabbed a sharp branch. His hand shaking, he swung as the creature came close. Hitting its eye, the beast screamed, the sound shaking the trees together. They fought Leora with skill and Daniel with desperation. At last, with a final strike of her blade, Leora cut deep into its neck. The creature collapsed into the stream, its body thrashing before sinking. Into the water, the current carried it away, leaving only ripples and silence. Daniel collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. His chest rose and fell as he looked at her. That was too close, he whispered. Leora stood above him, her glowing blade dripping with water. Her eyes softened as she reached down, helping him stand. For the second time, she had saved his life. They left the stream quickly, moving deeper into the forest. Hours later, they found something unexpected. The trees opened into a hidden valley. The ground glowed brighter here, covered in flowers that pulsed with light. In the center stood a giant structure, stone pillars carved with strange symbols covered in vines. Daniel stopped, his eyes wide. What is this place? Leora stepped forward slowly, her glowing eyes fixed on the carvings. She touched the stone gently, whispering words in her language. Her voice was heavy with emotion. Daniel walked closer. He traced the lines of the symbols. They were not human. But they were too perfect, too deliberate. This was no accident. Someone had built this long ago. Leora knelt at the base of the pillar. Her lips moved in a soft prayer. Daniel realized this place meant something to her, maybe her people, or maybe something older. He felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The forest was not just wild, it held secrets, ancient and hidden. Now they had found one, before Daniel could speak. A deep rumble shook the ground. The flowers around them flickered. The symbols on the stones glowed faintly. The air grew heavy. Leora's eyes widened. She grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him back, her voice urgent. She spoke one word he understood without needing translation: danger. The ground split near the pillars, and something began to rise from the earth, a shape of stone and light, massive, alive. Daniel's breath caught. He whispered, "This planet. It's not just dangerous. It's something more." Leora raised her blade. Daniel lifted his makeshift weapon. Together, they stood before the awakening secret of the alien forest. The uneasy alliance had brought them here. But now the true mystery of the planet was beginning to unfold. The valley was quiet again. The glowing flowers swayed gently in the wind. And the stone pillars stood like ancient guardians. Whatever had stirred in the ground had gone back to sleep. Leaving only silence and fear behind, Daniel and Leora moved. Away quickly, their steps fast, their hearts still racing. They walked until the trees closed around them again. Hiding the strange ruins by nightfall, they stopped in a sheltered hollow beneath a huge fallen tree. Leora lit a small fire, green flames flickering across the moss. Daniel sank to the ground, exhausted. His body trembled. But this time it was not from fear, it was from the weight of questions. The ruins, the glowing symbols, the monster rising from the earth. What kind of world was this? And why did Leora react with such emotion when she touched those stones? For a long while, neither of them spoke. Only the crackle of fire and the sounds of the forest filled the air. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. His voice was low. "Leora," he said, pointing at her, then pointing at the sky. "You're home." She looked at him, her glowing eyes unreadable. Then she nodded slowly. She placed a hand on her chest. "Leora," she said softly. Then she pointed to the stars, speaking a string of words in her language, her tone heavy with sorrow. Daniel understood enough. She was not from this planet. She had come from the stars. Just like him, encouraged, Daniel tapped his own chest. "Daniel," he pointed to the sky as well, then whispered, "Earth." Leora tilted her head, repeating, "Earth." H. The word came broken but soft. Daniel smiled faintly. He picked up a stick and began to draw in the dirt. He drew a circle for a planet. Then smaller circles for moons. He pointed at it and said, "Earth." Leora watched. Then knelt and drew beside him. Her lines were smoother, more practiced. She drew a star with many orbits, placing a small glowing stone at the center to represent her sun. She pointed at one of the orbits, tapped it gently, and whispered a word, her home. For the first time, Daniel realized how far apart their worlds were, yet here they sat, in the same firelight. On the same strange ground, the silence grew heavy. Again, but it was different now. Not fear, not confusion, something closer to trust. Daniel leaned back, staring at the twin moons above them. He began to speak slowly, using simple words, hoping she would understand. "My people build ships," he said, making a shape with his hands. "We travel, we fix, we explore." Leora listened carefully. Her glowing eyes narrowed in thought. Then she pointed to herself and said a word, repeating it with different tones until Daniel understood, meant explorer. She was one too. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He thought of his lost crew, the faces of people he would never see again. His voice shook. "My friends?" "Gone." He mimed an explosion with his hands. Closing his eyes, Leora's expression softened. She reached out, placing her hand gently over his. Her touch was warm, steady. She spoke a word in her tongue. Repeating it softly, it sounded like comfort, like a promise. Daniel didn't know the meaning, but he felt it in his chest. Slowly, Leora began to share more. She pointed at the scars on her armor, tracing them with her glowing fingers. She spoke in her language, her tone shifting anger. grief, sorrow. Daniel caught only fragments, but he understood enough. She too had lost people. She too was alone. The firelight danced between them. Two survivors, two broken lives, sharing pieces of themselves through gestures, drawings, and fragile words. Hours passed as they traded stories in fragments. Daniel telling of Earth's oceans, mountains, and cities filled with light. Leora describing great crystal towers, skies with 3 moons, and oceans that glowed in the dark. At times they laughed at their failed words. At times they sat in silence, letting the fire speak for them. But in those moments, something unspoken grew. Not just trust, not just survival, something deeper connection. As the fire burned low, Daniel looked at her. Her silver hair shimmered in the glow. Her glowing eyes reflected the stars. He whispered, "Not alone," pointing at himself, then at her. Leora smiled faintly, the kind of smile born from pain. But carrying hope, she repeated his words in her soft, broken voice. "Not alone." The night wrapped around them, the forest still growled. Creatures still moved in the shadows. But inside their small circle of fire, there was peace. Daniel closed his eyes. Not in fear, but in trust, for the first time since the crash. He allowed himself to rest, and Leora, the alien woman who had once been a stranger, kept watch with her glowing blade across her knees, her eyes never leaving the forest. Her presence, now more than protection, it was comfort. The alliance that began in fear was changing. It was no longer just survival. It was the beginning of something greater. Morning came slowly. The twin suns climbed above the trees, filling the forest with shifting golden light. Daniel woke to the sound of water dripping from the leaves and the faint crackle of fire. His body was sore, but his wounds were healing. The bandages Leora had made were strong. Leora was already awake. Sitting near the fire with her glowing blade across her lap, her eyes watched the horizon as if she expected danger at every moment. Daniel studied her quietly, wondering how someone so strong could also carry such sadness in her gaze. They ate in silence strange fruits Leora had gathered, sweet but sharp on the tongue. Afterward, she motioned for him to follow. They walked through the forest again, deeper than ever before. By midday, they found something strange in the wreckage of fallen trees. Half buried in the ground lay a small metal box. Its surface was scarred and rusted. But Daniel's heart jumped when he saw it. "A beacon," he whispered. His hands shook as he brushed away the dirt. It was old, but the design was familiar. An emergency signal transmitter. If powered, it could call for rescue. Daniel's chest filled with sudden hope. He turned the box over in his hands, searching. His fingers found the switch and the small display screen, but the light inside was dead. The battery was nearly gone. He groaned softly. No. Not enough power. Leora knelt beside him. Her glowing eyes scanned the beacon with curiosity. She touched the display gently, then looked at Daniel. He tried to explain with simple words, pointing at the beacon, then to the sky. "Rescue," he said, making the shape of a ship with his hands. Then he shook his head and pointed to the beacon again. "Weak. Not strong," Leora frowned. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a small glowing crystal. It pulsed faintly with energy. She pressed it against the beacon. The display flickered, then came alive with a faint hum. Daniel's eyes widened. "It works," he breathed. Hope surged in his chest. But then the screen showed a warning. The power level was too low. The beacon had enough charge for only one transmission. One signal, one chance. Daniel stared at the message, his throat dry. One signal meant one rescue. Maybe one ship would come, but there would not be room or fuel for two. He looked at Leora. She looked back at him, and in that moment, both of them understood the truth. Only one of them could be saved. Silence fell heavy over them. The forest sounds faded, and even the air seemed to grow still. Daniel's mind raced, his heart pounded. He thought of Earth as home, his people, everything. He had lost. If he used the beacon, maybe he could go back. Maybe he could live. But then he looked at Leora. Her glowing skin reflected the weak light of the beacon. Her silver hair fell across her face as she watched him. She had saved his life again and again. She had shared her food, her strength, her grief. She was no longer just a stranger, she was the reason he had survived this far. Daniel's voice was low, broken. You? Use it. He pushed the beacon toward her. Leora's eyes widened. She shook her head quickly. Speaking in her own tongue, her words sharp, urgent. Daniel understood enough. She was refusing. She was telling him to take it. He shook his head. His voice firm. No, Leora, you need it. She grabbed his hands, pushing the beacon back into them. Her glowing eyes burned with intensity. She spoke again, slower this time, her voice heavy with meaning. You? Go, human rare. Human. Must live. The words were broken, but clear enough. Daniel's throat tightened. She was choosing him. She was ready to stay behind, but he could not accept it. His voice rose. No. Not without you, not alone. He pointed to her, then to himself, together. For a long moment, they argued without words, their gestures sharp, their faces filled with pain. The beacon sat between them, glowing faintly like a cruel test. Finally, Daniel stood and walked a few steps away. His hands trembled as he stared. At the sky, he could almost see Earth in his mind-visions, mountains, the blue glow of home. But when he turned back, he saw Leora watching him. Her glowing eyes filled with sorrow, but also something else, trust. He whispered, if I leave, I lose you. If I stay, maybe we both find a way. She tilted her head, her expression softening for the first time. She did not push the beacon toward him. She let it rest on the moss between them, unused. Daniel knelt and pressed his hand. Against hers, their fingers touched, human and alien. Two survivors bound by something stronger than fear. He smiled faintly, though his eyes burned with emotion. No choice, he whispered. We stay, we fight, we live. Leora studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, she nodded. Her lips curved into a small, mischievous smile. The beacon's light flickered weakly, then went dark. The power was gone. The chance was lost. But in its place, something else had been chosen. Something else had been chosen, something that no machine could give. Not escape, not rescue, but hope that night. They built a stronger shelter from the wreckage of trees, side by side. Daniel used his engineer's hands. Leora used her warrior's skill. The forest still growled around them, but together they worked together, they endured, and as the stars rose above the alien sky, Daniel realized that sometimes the greatest choice was not survival alone, but survival together. The beacon lay dead on the moss, its faint glow gone, only a cold shell left behind for Daniel. It was not a signal of rescue anymore, it was a reminder of the choice they had made. He and Leora would not wait for someone to save them. They would survive here, together. Days turned into weeks. Each sunrise brought new challenges. Each night brought new dangers. But with every passing day, Daniel and Leora became stronger, not just as individuals, but as a team. Daniel built tools. From the broken metal of his ship, crude knives, hooks, and even a shelter frame. His engineer's mind never rested. He turned wreckage into walls and branches into roofs. Leora hunted and gathered, moving with grace through the alien forest. Her glowing blade never failed against the beasts that stalked them. Together, they created a small home, simple but safe. In the beginning, Daniel thought of Earth often. He would sit under the twin moons and remember oceans and cities of light. His heart ached with longing, but slowly, the memories became softer, the grief less heavy. For when he turned his head, he saw Leora watching the fire, her silver hair catching the glow. her glowing eyes steady, and in that sight, he felt a new kind of home. Leora changed too, at first. Her eyes carried only caution, suspicion, and sorrow. But as days passed, her voice grew lighter. Her laughter came more easily. She taught Daniel more of her words, and he taught her his. Their conversations grew. Still simple, but warmer, sometimes. They spoke about their lost worlds, sometimes about small things, the taste of fruit, the shape of stars. They learned to share silence without fear. Silence no longer meant loneliness, it meant peace. But the forest never stopped testing them. One night, a storm shook the sky. Rain fell in heavy sheets, lightning split the trees. Their shelter trembled. Daniel and Leora worked together to hold the walls, their hands raw from rope and wood. When the storm passed, they were soaked, bruised. But alive, they laughed together under the broken roof. A laughter born not from joy, but from triumph. Another time, a pack of beasts surrounded their camp, eyes burning red in the night. Daniel held a spear he had built, his body shaking, but Leora stood tall beside him. Her glowing blade lit the clearing. The beasts attacked, and together they fought. Their movements in rhythm, their strikes in harmony when the last beast fell. They leaned on each other, breathless but unbroken. Every trial shaped them. Every danger bound them closer. One evening, as the sun set in colors of fire and violet, Daniel sat near the stream. He looked at the water and saw his reflection, thinner, harder, his face lined with struggle. But when he turned, he saw Leora kneeling nearby, washing fruit in the glowing water. Her silver hair fell across her shoulders. Her glowing skin shimmered like light itself. For a moment, he realized something. He was no longer just surviving because of her. He wanted to survive for her. Later that night, he whispered softly, Leora. She looked at him, her glowing eyes curious. Daniel pointed at her, then at himself, and finally to the stars above. Together. She stared at him for a long moment, her lips curved into the smallest smile. And she repeated, broken but beautiful. Together, the word hung between them like a vow. Time passed. And seasons on the alien world changed. Trees bloomed with strange flowers, then shed glowing leaves that covered the ground like starlight. Daniel and Leora built more than shelter. They built a life, a small garden from seeds she carried, traps for hunting, and a fire pit that never truly went out. They no longer spoke of leaving. The beacon was gone, rescue was gone. But they had found something greater than escape. They had found each other. One dawn, as the suns rose over the horizon, painting the sky in gold and silver, Daniel stood at the edge of the forest, his heart steady, his mind calm, behind him. Leora approached, her blade at her side, her steps light. She stood beside him, her eyes reflecting the twin suns. For a while, they said nothing. They only watched as light spread across the alien world. The trees shimmered. The flowers pulsed with color. The world no longer felt like a prison. It felt alive, vast, full of promise. Daniel took a deep breath, his voice low but strong. This is not the end, he said, pointing to the horizon. This is the beginning. Leora tilted her head. She did not understand all the words, but she felt their weight. She reached out, placing her hand over his, her voice soft. Beginning. She repeated. Together, they stood as the new day rose. Two strangers from different stars, no longer lost, no longer broken. The forest would still test them. The dangers would never end. But they had chosen not to wait for rescue, not to surrender to despair. They had chosen to live, to fight, and to build something new. And in the light of that dawn, Daniel and Leora were no longer just survivors. They were partners. They were hope. Not the end of a story, but the start of one. A new dawn on an alien world.